The high-end testing ground is a fortress of concrete and carbon fiber, now trembling under a violent, unnatural roar. In the center of the track, the million-dollar prototype screams at redline, trapped in an electronic death loop. The technical crew stumbles back, faces pale, sensing the machine is seconds away from tearing itself apart. The manager spins around, her voice cracking with pure desperation. "Can anyone drive this?" Silence falls. The world's best professionals look at their feet, paralyzed by the risk. Then a single dad lets go of his son's hand and steps forward without a second of hesitation. The man's name is Lucas Bennett. At 43 years old, his life is a masterpiece of quiet, intentional routines. He lives in a world of school runs, grocery lists, and the soft glow of a bedside lamp while reading bedtime stories. To the world outside, he is invisible. Just another face in the morning commute, another man waiting patiently in line at the post office. To the 9-year-old boy, Aaron, standing behind the heavy safety fence, he is the entire world. He is the fixer of broken bicycles, the chef of Saturday morning pancakes, and the steady hand that never trembles. Today, Lucas isn't a VIP. He isn't a high-stakes investor or a member of the corporate machinery that built this playground for the wealthy. He is here on a simple open-day invitation, a rare treat for Aaron, who dreams in the language of pistons and exhaust notes. Lucas stands in the crowd wearing an ordinary, slightly faded navy jacket and a pair of old sneakers that have seen too many walks in the park. He looks like a man who spends more time in the home improvement aisle than in the pit lane of a racetrack. To any observer, he is just another visitor with a child, a background character in a much grander story of corporate ambition and mechanical prowess. But appearances are a dangerous mask, a shield Lucas built to protect the peace he fought so hard to find. 10 years ago, the name Lucas Bennett carried a weight that could silence a room of engineers. In the world of high-performance racing, tactical defense driving, and precision vehicle dynamics, he was a ghost, a master instructor for advanced safety and precision skid control. He was the man the manufacturers called when their prototypes became unmanageable. He taught the elite, special forces, executive protection teams, and Formula One hopefuls how to survive the impossible. He spent his youth dancing on the razor's edge of physics, finding traction where others found only chaos, and understanding the soul of a car through the vibrations in his fingertips. He walked away from that life on a rainy Tuesday, following a family tragedy that left him as the sole guardian of a toddler. The fire that once drove him to seek the fastest lap times was extinguished by a much deeper, more primal flame, the need to be present for his son. He traded the smell of burning rubber for the scent of baby powder. He traded the roar of the crowd for the silence of a nursery. He chose peace. He chose Aaron. Now he works in internal technical training for a local logistics firm, a desk job where his greatest challenge is a jam printer or a boring PowerPoint presentation. He buried his talent so deep that even he sometimes forgets the lightning that used to live in his veins. The event today is a high-stakes showcase for a prototype performance car, the Apex 01, a mechanical predator designed to redefine the limits of street-legal speed. Emily Carter, the 40-year-old manager in charge of safety and operations, is under immense pressure. Her eyes are bloodshot from lack of sleep, and her radio headset seems to be fused to her ear. The grandstands are filled with potential global partners, tech billionaires, and international press. One mistake here doesn't just mean a dented fender. It means the death of a multi-million-dollar project and a devastating blow to the company's stock. Lucas has been watching from the sidelines since the gates opened. While the influencers were busy taking selfies with the shiny carbon fiber bodywork, Lucas was listening. He wasn't looking at the paint. He was looking at the way the tires sat on the rims. He heard the slight metallic ping in the idle, a sign of a lean fuel mixture. He watched the way the suspension reacted to the uneven patches of the asphalt during the low-speed warm-ups. He saw the subtle signs of a machine that was being pushed by people who treated it like a computer program rather than a living, breathing entity of heat and friction. He noticed the way the test drivers were gripping the steering wheel. Too tight, too anxious. They were fighting the car's natural frequency instead of flowing with it. Lucas felt a familiar itch in his palms, a muscle memory of how to balance a chassis on the brink of disaster. But he pushed it down. He adjusted Aaron's hat and reminded himself that he was just a dad today. Emily Carter paces the pit lane, her voice tight as she barks orders into her radio. She is a woman of absolute precision, but today the variables are spinning out of control. The track temperature is dropping faster than predicted, and the prototype software is acting temperamental. She looks at her clipboard, then at the sky, praying for the weather to hold. She doesn't notice the man in the faded jacket. She doesn't know that the answer to her upcoming nightmare is standing right next to the popcorn stand, holding a child's hand. Lucas remains calm, his eyes fixed on the track, waiting. He knows the car better than the people who built it just by watching it move, and he knows that very soon the silence of the crowd is going to be broken by the sound of a mistake that no one else is prepared to fix. The schedule calls for the velocity burst, a high-speed acceleration and emergency braking test designed to show off the prototype's advanced stability systems and carbon ceramic brakes. It is the centerpiece of the afternoon. The internal test driver, a young man named Julian, climbs into the cockpit. Julian has undeniable talent and a high-speed license, but he also has an ego that is larger than his actual experience under pressure. He wants to give the press a show. He wants the cameras to capture the smoke, the drama, and the sheer audacity of the Apex 01. As the car enters Sport Plus mode, its personality shifts visibly. The exhaust valves open wide with a metallic snap, and the engine starts to breathe like a cornered animal. It becomes a different beast, aggressive, twitchy, and hypersensitive to every micro input. Julian floors it. The car launches with a violence that pushes him back into his seat, the four-wheel drive system clawing at the pavement. But as he approaches the first sharp turn at nearly 100 miles per hour, the rear tires lose their grip on a patch of cold, shaded tarmac that the sun hasn't touched all day. The car twitches. It's a minor slide, a moment in racing terms. But Julian, blinded by the pressure of the audience, panics. Instead of steering into the slide and maintaining a steady throttle to let the electronics do their job, he does the worst thing possible. He lifts off the gas abruptly and slams on the brakes. The weight shifts forward with terrifying speed, overloading the front tires. The rear of the car lightens up instantly, and the vehicle begins to pirouette. The engine screams in protest as the transmission struggles to keep up with the conflicting signals from the sensors. The car finally comes to a dead, shuddering stop in the middle of the track, facing the wrong direction. The engine doesn't die, though. It's trapped in a high RPM cycle, a software glitch triggered by the sudden, violent stall and the driver's frantic inputs. It continues to roar at nearly 7,000 RPM, a high-pitched metallic wail that vibrates through the concrete and sends birds scattering from the nearby trees. It sounds like a machine trying to tear itself apart. The safety crew immediately signals a full stop. The entire program is frozen. Emily Carter rushes to the edge of the track, her face turning a ghostly shade of pale. She checks the telemetry on her handheld device. The car isn't physically broken, but its brain is utterly confused. The electronic stability control is fighting the mechanical inputs in a violent feedback loop. It's a ghost in the machine, and the car is sitting there, screaming, a ticking time bomb of prestige and engineering. Seconds feel like hours. The whispers from the partners in the VIP tent grow louder, turning into murmurs of doubt and skepticism. The press cameras are zooming in on the stalled vehicle, capturing every second of the humiliation in high definition. Julian, the driver, climbs out of the car, his hands shaking so hard he can barely unclip his helmet. His eyes are wide with fear. He's seen the monster inside the machine, and he refuses to go back. He walks away, head down, leaving the car roaring in the middle of the track. Emily knows that if they don't move that car in the next 3 minutes, the launch is a total failure. She can't tow it. That would be a public relations nightmare that would haunt the brand for years. It needs to be driven off the track under its own power. It needs a human touch to override the electronic hysteria. She turns to her remaining team of professional drivers, her voice rising in desperation, cutting through the mechanical roar. Can anyone drive this? I need someone to reset the rhythm. I need someone who isn't afraid to get in there and bring it in. Klartschom. The professionals, men who spend their lives talking about their bravery, look at their feet. They see the twitchy rear end of that car. They hear that angry, unpredictable engine. They see the career-ending potential of a crash on live television with the world's press watching. They are calculating the risk to their personal brands. Responsibility is a heavy weight, and in this moment of crisis, no one wants to carry it. They are waiting for someone else to be the hero, hoping the moment passes them by. That's when Lucas Bennett lets go of his son's hand. He doesn't look for approval. He doesn't ask for a waiver or a helmet. He simply walks through the gap in the safety barrier. He moves with a steady, grounded confidence that cuts through the surrounding panic like a cold blade. He isn't running. He is simply arriving, moving toward the sound of the chaos as if he were walking into his own living room. Aaron watches his father, his eyes wide. He doesn't cry out. He knows that walk. He knows that when his father moves like that, the world becomes a safer place. Lucas reaches the track, the heat from the asphalt rising through his old sneakers, and he doesn't blink at the screaming machine. If you believe that true strength appears when everyone else steps back, subscribe now to watch how this father takes control of the chaos. The real drive is about to begin. Lucas reaches the edge of the pit wall where Emily stands, surrounded by panicked technicians. He doesn't waste words. He doesn't offer a resume or tell her about his past. "I'm not here to fix the engine," he says, his voice a low, resonant anchor in the storm of shouting voices. "I'm here to drive it back to safety. Let me in." Emily is in a state of near collapse. She demands to see his credentials, her voice shrill and cracked with stress. She doesn't have time for a visitor. She doesn't have time for a dad who thinks he can handle a 7-figure prototype. "Get back behind the fence," she screams. But then she catches his eyes. They aren't the eyes of a hobbyist or an adrenaline junkie. They are the eyes of a man who has looked into the abyss of a high-speed blowout and didn't blink. They are cold, analytical, and utterly devoid of the panic that has infected everyone else. She quickly scans the visitor registration on her tablet, recognizing the name Lucas Bennett as it pops up in a secondary database of legendary retired instructors. Her jaw drops. She looks at the man in the faded navy jacket, then back at the screen. She remembers the stories. The man who could save a car from a 180-degree spin at 120 miles per hour. She hesitates for exactly 2 seconds. The reputation of a ghost is all she has left to bet on. She nods, her voice barely a whisper. "Do it. Just get it off the track before it blows itself apart." Lucas walks to the car. He doesn't rush. He doesn't jump in like a movie star. He approaches the driver's side door and waits for a moment, placing his palm on the warm carbon fiber, letting the vibration of the screaming engine pass through him. He is reading the car. He climbs into the cockpit, and the first thing he does, the very first thing, is turn off the Sport Plus mode and the traction control override. He brings the car back to its base, limp home settings. He silences the digital screaming. He doesn't look at the cameras. He doesn't look at the crowd. He spends the next 60 seconds adjusting the seat. He moves it forward, then back, until his leg has the perfect 45-degree angle for the pedals. He adjusts the steering wheel height so his wrist can drape over the top. He tilts the mirrors. He is performing a ritual of ergonomics that has nothing to do with speed and everything to do with connection. He is telling the car, and his own nervous system, that they are now a single unit. He tests the brake pedal, feeling the hydraulic pressure against the pads. He blips the throttle gently, not to rev it, but to hear the breathing of the intake. He is listening for the heartbeat hidden beneath the noise. The engine's roar begins to settle as he clears the electronic errors through a series of precise pedal sequences he learned decades ago, long before these computers were even designed. He is essentially flushing the digital system with analog logic. He engages the gear. The car doesn't jerk. It doesn't lurch. It simply begins to roll forward at a crawl. The crowd is so silent, you can hear the wind whistling through the grandstands and the faint clicking of cameras. Lucas isn't flooring it. He isn't trying to show off or reclaim his lost glory. He is smoothing out the jagged edges of Julian's panic. He is reteaching the car how to walk. As he enters the first turn, the one that broke the previous driver, he feels the car wanting to fight. The tires are still cold and the pavement is slick with a fine layer of dust. But Lucas doesn't fight the steering wheel. He uses tiny surgical movements, barely an inch of rotation. He is whispering to the tires through the steering rack. He finds the exact point of traction and holds it there with a steady, unwavering foot. He feels the weight transfer in the small of his back, anticipating the slide before it even begins. The professionals watching from the pits are mesmerized. They've seen cars driven at the limit, but they've never seen a car driven with such absolute, almost telepathic understanding. Lucas isn't just steering, he is balancing the car on a microscopic needle of equilibrium. He uses the throttle to settle the rear suspension, a technique so subtle that only the most seasoned engineers recognize it. He is massaging the mechanical components back into alignment. The roar of the engine settles into a smooth, rhythmic hum. The car, which looked like an untamable, bucking beast just minutes ago, now looks like a professional tool in the hands of a master craftsman. He completes a slow, perfect lap. There is no tire smoke. There are no dramatic slides. There is only pure mathematical stability. It is the most beautiful thing the engineers have ever seen. A machine finally understood by its master. The tension in the air doesn't just dissipate, it evaporates, replaced by a profound sense of awe that ripples through the crowd. The professionals in the pits, the ones who stayed behind the wall, realize they aren't watching a drive. They are watching a masterclass in emotional regulation and mechanical empathy. They are watching a man who doesn't need to go fast to prove he is the fastest person on the property. He brings the car into the pit lane with the grace of a ghost returning to the shadows, the engine now idling as quietly as a sleeping cat. Even the car seems to have breathed a sigh of relief. Lucas brings the car to a halt exactly on the white line of the designated marker. He doesn't just stop, he arrives with millimetric precision. He engages the park brake, goes through a meticulous cool-down sequence for the turbos, and finally shuts down the engine. The silence that follows is deafening, a physical weight that hangs over the entire testing ground. He steps out of the car, his expression as neutral and calm as if he had just finished parking his own SUV at the grocery store. He doesn't wait for the applause that is starting to ripple through the stands like a wave. He doesn't look for the cameras that are now swiveling toward him, hungry for a hero. He isn't interested in the spotlight. He never was. He walks straight to Emily Carter, who is standing frozen by the pit wall, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and relief. "The car is fine," he explains, his voice steady, low, and completely devoid of ego. The machine wasn't the problem. The driver was under too much pressure. He was fighting the electronics. And when you fight a computer with fear in your heart, the computer always wins. You don't need a mechanic or a software update. You just need someone to drive with the right tempo, someone who respects the machine enough to let it do its job. He pauses, looking back at the track where the shadows have grown longer. The sport mode wasn't the issue. It was the surface temperature in the shade of that first turn. It was too low for that much torque on those specific tires. If you want to run the next test for the partners, keep it in standard mode for the first 2 laps to build heat in the rubber. Once the tires are sticky, then you can go fast. But don't let that kid back in the seat today. He's not ready for the weight of this car. Emily exhales a breath she feels like she's been holding for a decade. The weight on her shoulders lightens instantly. Her safety crew, now emboldened by the calm Lucas has brought to the scene, rushes to the car and confirms everything he said. The telemetry error was nothing more than a human error translated into code, a panic attack in carbon fiber form. The car's onboard computer shows that Lucas didn't exceed 40% throttle once, yet he cleared all the fault codes through sheer smoothness of input. Because of Lucas, the program is saved. Emily quickly coordinates with the announcers, her professional instincts kicking back in. They frame the stall as a planned demonstration of the car's advanced safety recovery systems and the ease with which its electronics can be reset. The press, desperate for a story, buys it. The partners are impressed by the reliability and the user-friendliness they just witnessed. The potential disaster has been transformed into a brilliant marketing victory. As the crowd begins to cheer and the VIPs start nodding in approval, All eyes turn toward the man in the faded jacket. The reporters are starting to move toward him, sensing a human interest story that could go viral across the globe. They want to know his name. They want to know where he came from. They want to know how a nobody outstrove the professionals and tamed the beast. But Lucas isn't looking at them. He's already turned his back on the track in the million-dollar prototype. He's looking toward the safety fence, searching for a small boy in a red hat who is jumping up and down with pride. He has already forgotten the car. His only mission now is to get back to his son. Emily Carter manages to intercept Lucas before he reaches the exit gate. She is breathless, her professional mask finally slipping to reveal a look of genuine, raw gratitude. In front of her entire team, the drivers who failed and the engineers who panicked, she extends her hand. "Mr. Bennett," she says, her voice trembling slightly, "you didn't just save that car. You saved this entire company today. You saved my career." She offers him a position on the spot. Lead safety consultant, chief test instructor. A salary that would have more zeros than his current annual income could ever hope to see. It's the kind of dream job that people spend their whole lives chasing. The fame, the power, the access to the world's most beautiful machines. Lucas looks at the job offer. He looks at the shiny glass buildings, the flashing cameras, and the high-speed world he once called home. He remembers the adrenaline, but he also remembers the cost. The nights away from home, the constant risk, the emptiness of a life lived only for speed. He thinks about how easily a man can get lost in the noise of his own success. Then he looks at his watch. He doesn't ask about the benefits. He doesn't ask about the car he'd get to drive. He asks one single focused question: will the training sessions always finish on time? Emily is momentarily stunned, her mouth hanging open. I beg your pardon. "I have to pick up my son from school every day at 3 p.m., Lucas says, his voice as firm and immovable as it was when he was behind the wheel. "That is my primary job. Everything else, including driving your cars and saving your reputation, is secondary. If I can't be at that gate when he walks out, I'm not interested. No amount of money is worth missing that." Emily looks at him, really looks at him, and sees a different kind of strength, a strength more powerful than any engine. It's not the strength of a driver who can handle 1,000 horsepower. It's the strength of a father who knows exactly what matters in a world that has forgotten. She realizes that his legendary driving ability isn't just a talent, it's a reflection of his internal discipline. She smiles, a genuine warm smile that replaces her corporate coldness for the first time in years. "We will make sure you're never a minute late, Lucas," she says. "In fact, we'll build a schedule around you." Aaron runs through the gate the moment the security guard opens it, throwing his arms around his father's waist. Lucas picks him up effortlessly, ruffling his hair and adjusting his hat. He holds him close, the warmth of the boy's hug more rewarding than any trophy he ever won. "Did you see the car, Dad?" Aaron asks, his eyes wide with wonder. "It was so loud. Did you fix it? You look like a superhero." "I just helped it find its way back, buddy," Lucas replies, kissing the top of his head. "It was just a little confused. But I think it's time we go get some ice cream, don't you? You've been very patient." They walk toward the dusty parking lot, two ordinary people moving away from the noise, the fame, and the flashing lights. Lucas Bennett didn't step up for the applause. He didn't step up for the money. He stepped up because a problem needed solving, and he was the only one with the hands to do it. The world is full of people seeking the stage, hungry for the spotlight. But the world is saved day after day by the ones who only step onto it when the lights go out, and who are more than happy to return to the shadows the moment the job is done. If you believe that composure is the most valuable skill in a crisis, subscribe for more stories of hidden strength. Leave a comment below. When the world stops and everyone else steps back, will you have the courage to move forward, or will you stay still?